Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Hey, do not fret. There are brighter days ahead, literally, with the solstice and Yule season upon us. Days will now be getting longer. Excited to have you join us for Wine Foundry Wednesday. I am Stuart Ake and joined by several colleagues at the winery, including Dr. Patrick Sabo. The doctor is figurative, but he is our director of winemaking, Valerie Von Berg, the owner of the Wine Foundry, and Jenny Dahl, the designer of most labels on the planet and almost everybody's labels who are going to be here for it tonight. Hey, so speaking of labels, I'm really glad Jenny is here because tonight we're going to take kind of our first look at what kind of examine what makes for a good back label. So I think we can discuss, brainstorm, debate, and arm wrestle over how to make best use of a very, very limited space. After that, we'll also have a quiz. We'll talk about sparkling wine and then answer any other questions you may have. But first, to kick things off, I'm going to introduce or reintroduce Valerie Von Berg, owner of the Wine Foundry, because Valerie is going to make an announcement which may shake the very foundation upon which you stand, sit, or slouch. Valerie, what is coming back in 2023?
But no pressure.
No
We
pressure.
are bringing back Barrel Break. And for the weekend of April 20th to the 22nd, for those of you who aren't familiar with Barrel Break, it is a multi-day kind of gathering of our clients. And we have a lot of fun. It involves some wine education, meals together, sharing of wine, tasting of wine, lots of wine. And it's a chance for our clients to come together as a community, get to know each other, share ideas, get inspired, and have a lot of fun. And our clients who have been with us for a long time look forward to gathering with friends that they've made at the Wine Foundry, and we really look forward to this event. It's a lot of fun, and I hope you all can join us.
Fantastic. And what was so amazing is that with my technology chops, there was no flaw showing those photographs were part of my desktop. Thanks, Val. Really excited to have Barrel Break. And there's a number of activities, tasting sessions, optional meals, and we're starting to kind of brainstorm in-house about, how we can kind of really savor that time after 3 years apart. Okay, let's shift gears into back label. So we're going to spend, I guess, about 10, 15 minutes on it. And we really want to have you part of this dialogue. So it's really easy for us to kind of be leading things. So the first person who speaks tonight gets a special prize. In addition to going out to recess 5 minutes early, I will devise some way to honor you and put you upon a throne or pedestal of your choice. So I'm going to pose a question for you. Think about the wines that you have seen. Think about the wines you may have made. And just want you to think about and reflect upon what elements make for a good back label. So while I'm just going to give you kind of 30 seconds of reflection. And I will try to see if I can share this here, a little bit more polished version. I know you're really excited about Barrel Break. So some examples which I've received approval from people within our community. So I would say pay less attention, although it's part of it because this is a single label of what is on the left side. But how this client kind of positions something, and I'll give you just 5 seconds to read it. If you can't read it, I recommend you just squint and put your face very close to the screen. And this is translated from the original Greek. That was a joke. I'll show you the next, a different one. These are not Wine Foundry clients, but see how they position. And I'm sorry, I kind of took photos off the web, but so you talk about a Pinot Gris on the left. Pairs well with salad, seafood, and strong cheeses. On the right, that one pairs well with casseroles. That's kind of my first go-to when I am thinking about wine, is what would pair with a casserole. And then one of our clients, they chose to have their poem. Pero mi español no está bien, but I'll try to do it. The talk, the wine, the table, a perfect combination, a friendship for all the tests, or to all the tests. But how do you share it? How do you keep it? How does someone experience it, or someone else experience it? Just like it came to us inside the bottle. So a poem. And this person has taken a different tack. They've done a lot of work, because it's honoring their great grandmother who raised the family in a shack in Mississippi. And so they're trying to distill it down to a thing as in honor of her. Different approaches. So let's kind of throw this out. We've had some other people join us, and you can either have your screen on or off. What makes a good back label? And I know you want to be put on a pedestal and go out to recess early. Anybody have anything like, what is it? And Wine Foundry staff can jump in as well. But I would love to also hear from everyone who makes wine.
To me, what makes a great label, just thinking about labels before I started creating my own label, I always want to know great pairings with the wine, but I also want to know a little bit of backstory, and I want to know something personal. So I love reading personal backgrounds, and then I also love seeing, what they recommend to pair with their wine. So
and this word we're probably going to hear from others, and so just kind of, I'll put it on the whiteboard. So this is an imaginary whiteboard writing down what Radha was sharing with us. Thank you, Radha. I hope I didn't spell that wrong. Boom. There we go. Tracy, you looked like you were about to make a motion for your mute thing. Was that?
No, but I'm happy to chime in. Hi, Radha. Yeah, I agree. We were just working with Jenny on our label this week, and we too like to have some information about, well, what would I enjoy this wine with? So that pairing combination is important to us. Anything you'd add?
No. I mean, some expectation. I think I don't know if you used the word positioning or differentiation, Stu, but what sets this wine apart? Not just setting the expectation, but how are you different than anything else that they might experience, particularly in that varietal? I've seen Sauvignon Blanc before, but what makes this either like the epitome of Sauvignon Blanc or different than the other ones that I've tried? And how can you express that in that little space? I find that compelling when I'm looking to buy a bottle of wine.
Thank you. John, you just put on your screen. Does that mean you're making, like, you're ready to jump in? So I'm interpreting what she's saying, and she's saying, yes, absolutely, but my arms are not long enough to reach to the screen. Crystal, are you jumping in?
Hi, everybody. So we made our wine just for us, our family and friends. So not for retail. So for us, it was important to share kind of a personal story of why we chose to make the wine, and also a little tidbit about the vineyard, because it was a very special vineyard, Stagecoach Vineyard. So we chose to share a little bit about the particular place that the wine came from. So that was our choice with the back label.
Okay. In some ways, that kind of ties along with what Paul had just said about, hey, what separates your wine? Now, granted, we are a very small community here, so several people might make wine from Stagecoach, but in the grand scheme of things, the opportunity to work with these prestigious vineyards, like not everyone gets to work with these grapes. It's very hard to do this. Valerie, you were kind of smiling. It looked like you were going to chime in. No?
I was Philip has joined us. So I was
Philip
helping him get
Onberg.
logged on. I was helping
My
him
screen
get-
is jumping around, so sorry about that. Yep.
But since you called on me, I really appreciate that's very important in real estate, or very it's an opportunity, that real estate on the back of the bottle, to tell your story. And I love when I look at a wine bottle to learn a little bit about the producer, where the wine came from, or is the story of the producer. And so I really love the storytelling opportunity of that space.
Yeah, kind of echoing what Rada said right off the bat, right? Like, and that thing, like, what makes you you? But you also said a small amount of real estate, which, the label is, Jenny, you can chime in with label dimensions. It's kind of less important, but you got 2 inches. And for somebody like me who's, has been walking the earth as long as the Tyrannosaurus Rex, it becomes actually really difficult to actually read smaller copy. Jenny, I interrupted you. What were you going to say? Perfect. Jenny, were you going to chime in about something and I interrupted you? Darn. Patrick Sabo, please help me out.
Yeah, everyone's going to have their own preferences, for sure. I think you should really depends on who you're trying to appeal to. I think that one of the most important things to remember is that we all are looking for something a little bit different. To me personally, I actually don't love to be told what to pair it with. I like to decide for myself what to pair it with. But I don't think that, but a lot of people do like that, especially when they're not as experienced, I'd say,
Right.
as I am at tasting and knowing myself. And so I think that you should, I would encourage you to, but I would think that it's important that your client is going to make their own judgment about what they think is good or not. And so regardless of what I personally think of it, if I'm not your client, then it's really not, or average or kind of similar to that person, then my personal opinion is less relevant, And so I think that you kind of need to do what's true to you, but also understand who you're trying to appeal to. And so, because I would do different things, I'd say I'd have a different approach to a different crowd. And so it just depends on that crowd. And for me, when you try, like if you're trying to sell $100 bottle of Cabernet, trying too hard, I think makes you look like you're trying too hard. And so I personally, but I also am more of a minimalist in my preference. So I'd say that but that's why it appeals to me. So for anyone that agrees with me, I think that's appropriate. But for something that's, but I do think you need to, especially when you're selling it, it's got to look and feel good to you, or you're probably not going to do a very good job at selling. And so I think that you have to really try to stay true, but also remembering who you're trying to appeal to.
So Patrick, I have to ask a question, and that is, you said it looks like you're trying too hard. What does that mean? So you're trying to be too creative, or something? Can you explain that?
Well, from my experience, cheaper wines in general try to impress you with extra dogs on the label and extra look over here and look over there, and we put some really nice put some really nice words on there that makes it sound good. Because they're trying to, because the wine's not selling you itself. Either the brand's not selling you or the wine. So it looks like to me, again, you're just trying, you're using, you're trying so hard in sales. It looks like you're trying, like, to me, you're not fitting the part. This is a $20 wine, but when you're, like I said, when you're reasonably expensive, like, north of $50, I don't know, whatever the price point is, then again, this is just personal preference. I just think if the wine they should expect that the quality is going to be there. So if you're trying so hard on the label to oh my God, you got to buy this wine, it's just going to seem like maybe the quality isn't there. And so that, again, this is all prejudice that I have going into it. I think that's probably why I don't like to see a lot extra on, especially on expensive wines. And
Fair enough.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, I just said it's fair enough. And so watching about, even if you're doing it for non-commercial purposes, I guess watch out for superlatives, because the wine can speak for itself and it can be a reflection of you. So the other thing that I was kind of thinking of is, so we keep on talking about story. So kind of Radha kind of threw it out in the very beginning about this story element. And then you just kind of raised the question about, like, yes, you want a personal story, but you also want to be conscious of audience. So it's that balance of how do you nail the personal story, but also have it so that somebody else can understand it. When I used to be in radio, we always used to have to be cognizant of what's called roommate rock. Like, you're speaking to one person and you're narrow casting so little that you have to be conscious of a bigger audience. I think it's something to be aware of. Like, even what Crystal said, she's making the wine for her family and friends. And there's other people on here. Anybody else want to kind of chime in? Genevieve?
I know this is going to sound crazy, but I do actually buy wine based on the label. And when I turn, it's not just the front label, but it is like, if the front label is starting to talk to me, and then the back label tells me the story that I'm starting to pick up from, I buy the wine. And stories, although unique, there are some commonalities. So in speaking to the demographic, there are experiences that all of us have in common. And no matter where we grew up and what our situations were, there's just some essences that are commonalities and that everybody can relate to. So that's just me. And I try not to bring my bias when I'm working on everyone's labels. I just do what everybody wants. So, but that's my personal thing when I go to a wine store.
Yeah, Dawn? Or were you just waving, or are you chiming in? Okay.
And let's see, unmute me.
There you are.
There I am. Okay, I agree with what you said. When I was doing mine, it was how to get a personal enough story in 2 sentences so that you would read it, not be overwhelmed, but then want to really buy it. Because I'm huge on bottles and I'm huge on the look. I know you're not supposed to do that, so they say. But I love a pretty bottle, and oh my God, if it draws me in from the front and then gives me a little bit on the back, I'm sold. I'm buying the bottle. It's mine. I'm going home with it. So that's what I did for both of mine. I gave a story to the name of it, and it was like, hopefully it would bring out what I was putting in.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't have a space for a novel either. So it's whittling. And then hopefully if you can get them to buy it, or especially since a lot of people who sell their wine direct to consumer, or if you're doing it for non-commercial purposes, giving the bottle to a friend or family person, then you can also maybe have an email which can go into greater detail, or a card which can go into greater detail to kind of back up that story. Anything else? I mean, look, this is going to be part of a much bigger thing, but I just want us reflecting on this opportunity that we have to tell our stories in different way, and make sure that the story on the back label, if you choose to even put anything back there, is matching what you and Patrick are working with when you're developing these wines. And so it's a combination of you, your wine, and connecting that story. That
I
didn't
will
make
note,
any sense, but just nod your head. What were you going to say?
I will
a
note
question.
that in our research, looking at a number of other bottles, I was surprised to see how many only put just the facts, you know, alcohol content, varietal, production amount, aging, vessels, you know, and how that became a lot more than I thought.
So
At least
there is a space there, like there are some people who do that, but I always think, like, when people say, you know, 65% new French oak or whatever, and I know there's people here who do that. That's far more interesting to you than to anybody else. I just have to tell you, nobody cares about your rootstock. Nobody cares about your yeast. And I know that you pour over these vintage charts at nighttime and put them under your pillow. You are the only one who does that. Not you, Paul, although I know you do that too. But yeah, so just know that what some things that might be important to you don't resonate with a bigger audience. And I'm a wine geek, and my eyes glaze.
yeah, well, we're interested to see how many that we found doing that. That's just for that reason.
There's one or two. Yeah.
I have a question, Stuart.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So just want to kind of go back to something that Patrick had mentioned. And I'll use myself for example. So not a new winemaker. So I'm working on my third vintage with you guys, but new to people knowing about Anissa Wakefield wines. So when it comes to the back label, I mean, I have my demographic. I know who I am reaching with this wine, who I want to reach. But how do you narrow the lines between not not putting too much frou-frou in it for experienced wine drinkers, but putting enough wording and detail in it for people who are new to your label, but not necessarily new to wine?
Rada, I think that's the $1 million question, right? You know, I mean, it really is. Like,
yeah,
and we make mistakes. Some of you know that I started a brand that had a name that nobody could pronounce, right? And at my first wine tasting, and this is tangential but similar, I realized, oh my goodness, I launched a brand that nobody can pronounce. And so it's how do you know this? And I think it's great, like putting it in front of friends or running it by friends, family, or objective. You can just stop that guy at the cafe and say, hey, can I run something by you? And he might think you're kind of creepy, but does somebody else want to kind of chime in and talk about, like, how do we walk the tightrope?
Yeah.
I'll chime
Valerie,
in because we're
you,
working
Val.
on this on our own labels. I think you do 1 million drafts where you write down everything that's on your mind. You know, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about how long it is, and then just edit and edit and edit and edit until you boil it down to its essence, where you've really captured kind of the essence of what you want to say. And I think it takes many, many iterations to get there.
Yeah. And because you want to make sure that at the end of the day, when you submit this, when I submit this to Jenny, that I'm confident, I feel good about it. I feel like it's approachable for anyone. You know, I don't want to exclude too many people from the wine because of, you know, what's written on the label. You know, is there too much? Is there not enough? So,
and I think that's
my anxiety when it comes to the whole process, is that back label. Like, it gets me every time. So, yeah.
And I just want to say, Rada, us too. Like, I owe Val. She sent us stuff to look at because she was creating it, and then I promptly ignored it all day long. But that is the reality, and we're very. It's a luxury that we have people that we can bounce ideas off and hone and kind of break out the synonyms and look for antonyms, and then go, you know, like, let's go left field. And then ultimately then we, to Patrick's saying, like, okay, we're trying too hard, let's make it simple, right?
Right.
So Jenny?
And I think also putting it
Oh, sorry.
away. Oh, sorry, Jenny. I think also putting it away for a few days. And this is why you want to start early on your labels. You want to start very early on your labels, putting it away and getting it back out. Does this still resonate with me? Sharing it with a friend, and, you know, giving it time to breathe. And you're the entire time you're really boiling it down, boiling it down, boiling it down. But I think for us, it takes time.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks.
It's definitely crafting. And for any of you that have had a hard time coming up with that, I generally just say, drink some wine, write everything down, send it to me. The true test of if it's too much copy is 6-point or below type, so small type. So through actually dropping the copy into the back label, that's really helpful for a lot of people, because you can start to see how long it is and how much space it takes and how small the type is. And it really is a crafting.
Yeah, that's very true.
I think that it's critical to really, the main way to figure out what you want to say or not is to look at other people's examples. Okay, so there's a million brands out there currently already, and I'm certain that there's some out there that do what you like and what you don't like, and so it's critical to be. It's imperative that you need to be critical of other people's work so that you can help decide what you want to do on your own. So the best thing to do to me is just to look for good examples and emulate, or and so I mean, and that's subjective again to me. So the same bottle of wine, it doesn't have to be just a gender thing, but women appeal. You know, what appeals to a woman is different than what appeals to a man, and so. And so, yeah, I think you just got to decide who the audience is, and knowing your demographic is critical to the, and then you play to your strengths. And so, anyhow, I think that's really easier said than done, though. This is why you got to do multiple versions, and ideally have counsel, colleagues or someone you can bounce things off of. And so, my kids all have my wife as a writing instructor. So over the years in college, they'll write their paper and then she just hammers them, and they get to but it's a back and forth, and you fine tune, just like Valerie said, you get it, it's not going to be your first effort. It's not probably what you're going to come up with, but so it's easier said than done, and it's tough to come up with, decide what that balance is.
Crystal, did you wave or no? Or were you waving? No.
I'm just feeding my dog treats.
Fantastic. Okay. All right. And I want to thank Sarah and David for actually having a wine glass on screen, because I got a little nervous. I was like, wait, I think I'm the only person who's going to town here. So I hope that was helpful. And look, then we'll take a look at, in the future, we can examine, like, are there word counts or font sizes to start taking in? But just think about, like, how do I hone my story? And Radha, thanks for kind of like helping us start to talk about that tightrope a little bit. We'll shift gears. And I also know your time is really valuable to you. So I'm going to botch the screen share again, because we're moving on to quiz time. I know everybody is really excited about this. So here is the word of the day. I'm going to try to trick Patrick Sabo tonight. And actually, probably doesn't show it because this program is so polished, but not a lot of rehearsal goes into these things. Hey, so the question of the for Wine Foundry Wednesday is, what is an example of co-pigmentation in winemaking? Co-pigmentation. Here are the choices to select from. A, adding enzymes to light grape varietals like Pinot Noir to break down the skins to achieve a darker color. So adding enzymes. Or is it B, introducing mega purple grape concentrate derived from, is it Tenature grapes to achieve darker color. And those are the grapes that have red flesh, not just red skin, but red flesh. Number C, or letter 3, introducing isinglass, fish bladders to achieve darker color. Or D, adding white grapes to the fermentation of red grapes to achieve darker color. Co-pigmentation, I know everyone's using their cognates, and Patrick himself studied Latin for 7 years, but he stopped in the 5th grade. He was an early starter on that. So co-pigmentation. Dr. Sabo, is it A? Is it B? Is it C? Or is it letter E?
It's definitely E. It's definitely E.
All right, Patrick, so can you talk about co-pigmentation, and because people actually on this call we talked about it during harvest.
Yeah. Co-pigmentation is as for all the cork dorks out there, is a pretty cool thing, you know. So interestingly, there are compounds that organic compounds and metallic ions and things that can. So color is very boring. It's like a stacking. When I was at Davis, they taught us it was kind of like a lattice work, and so the anthocyanins or the pigments in the skins are kind of stacked, like they look like they almost look like little Mentos or something stacked up on top of each other. And so, and then that's a reasonable color, reasonable colors, lattice work. But there's a number of things that can really strengthen that lattice work, and they're including things that are found in white grapes and other compounds. So adding some Viognier into your Syrah can make it even darker. And so it's a stabilizing. It's like, so the color is that lattice work. If it has the right amount of kind of supportive framework, it can be darker and more intense and for longer. It also helps to keep the browning effect from happening. So the slight imaging and so it's a really kind of a intensifying of the color. And so it's an interesting phenomenon that happens in wine, not only in wine and other things as well, food and some food things as well, where we're adding an additional compounds that you need can help stabilize and broaden and darken and intensify the color and the density of the color. And so co-pigment is important for people that are colorists. If you've tasted with me and blended with me, I told you that you should not be using your eyes as your amateurs use their eyes. Everybody else, all professionals, don't think that color matters. It shouldn't matter, but it does matter to most people, unfortunately, in so many different ways. And so it should be like a wine's color, whether it was Pinot Noir or Cabernet or Merlot or Grenache. But because we've been told, or somewhere along in your bias, you probably think a darker wine is more intense and more complex, and that could be the truth, or it could be completely opposite of that. And so the reality is that color has nothing to do with quality or intensity, but co-pigmentation helps to make things so for everyone that's selling wine to people that aren't like myself, that are indeed colorists, which most people are. In many different ways, but certainly with wine, included wine, the darker wines, even when I pour a Malbec or I pour a Petit Syrah or I pour a Syrah into a glass, and sometimes Cabernet too, and people go, ooh, the color. And I started laughing. I'm like, well, if it was a Pinot Noir, would you say, ooh, the color is bad? No, you just wouldn't be as dark. And so you wouldn't, ideally, we wouldn't use color as a quality parameter, but again, a lot of people do. And so when you go into, and there are other ways to, like Stu just mentioned a couple of them, these aren't co-pigmentation, but using enzymes to extract more color and to stabilize the color helps to make it darker. Most wines you probably buy currently probably use color enzymes. Using concentrates like Mega Purple also adds color to a wine. So there are many things that people do to make the wine darker, because most people are impressed by that. And so, but it is to me, you know, kind of the least important part of a wine is how dark it is or not. But again, it's because I think that doesn't mean that you don't think that, or somebody else the next to you doesn't think that. So a lot of winemakers choose to do is to not have a soapbox like I do. They tend to just make it darker so they can appeal to the masses. And so because the masses think that darker equals better. And so, so anyhow, that really kind of was an offshoot of co-pigmentation. Sorry, Stu, did I answer what you were asking for or no?
It is. I'm just really disappointed that I was unable to stump the Sabo with that. I don't know what's coming up here, but it looks like, oh my goodness, I see a crown cap on a bottle. I'm shifting gears right here. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be offering bubbles. I have the 15 minutes of fame right here, and you're going to see that we have a crown cap on it. So for people who are interested in bubbles, we are going to do it. So, but we're not going to be doing the traditional method Champenois. So we're going to, we are not going to do a bottle fermentation. We're going to do a forced carbonation, just like we do with our 15 minutes of fame. And the reception has been really good. And that just because yields have been so low, we haven't been able to really approach bubbles. And because using the traditional method takes multiple years, some of you have been a little disappointed. So this is going to be a solution that we're going to kind of explore and open it up to our community. So just know it's available to you. And in terms of story, a crown cap with sparkling with a bone dry wine can be kind of cool. So fun, playful, and so feel free to email that with me. We've talked about barrel break, April 20th to the 22nd. That'll be a Thursday through Saturday. So a lot of people who live out of town can fly back home on Sunday. We began an investigation.
Hey, Stu,
Yes.
on barrel break, when do you give us the kind of the agenda for what goes on over those 3 days?
Wow. So that entails me actually putting together an agenda, which is, my goodness, you're really putting me on the spot. No, so actually our team, we're starting to do the brainstorming session, but basically there will be a reception on Thursday night of some sort, because people often come directly from the airport to there. So I really want you to know, like, you do not have to go out of your way to dress up super nicely or anything like that. You can come right there, frantic from the airport, and show up, and it's just pretension free and low key. And then there will be some workshops, so tasting elements, and we usually bring in kind of friends and colleagues from around the valley, so that you can kind of see how other professionals taste. And many of these have been very notable heavyweights. And so there will probably be a couple of things on that Friday, 2 to 3 activities on Friday, 2 to 3 activities on Saturday. And you're not required to come to everything. It's just what you want to participate in. And part of that, there will be something specifically for members who are part of our guild who sell their wine commercially, but that's really they're in a hermetically sealed room, but we do pump oxygen in there so nobody passes out. But there will be various things available to everyone. Can you give me till late January to put stuff together? If that's okay. But just
Absolutely.
know.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Yeah, like I said earlier, the foundation of the world upon which you stand will be shaken. And we've had a lot of earthquakes out here recently. So it's very possible. Hey, really good question about that. Any other questions that you'd